start falling asleep, then that's probably a problem with me. So I'll make sure I don't talk that long. I'll leave like the floor for some questions afterwards. But really impressed to see what you guys have done with your community here. This is where I did 4th grade. When I was being taught by Mr. Coffee, we were upstairs. So much different scenery for me, but I see you guys are taking complete ownership of that. So that's pretty cool. That's actually something that I can't imagine myself doing at your age. So you guys are like years beyond wherever I was at this point. So I promise you, I actually am a captain. I forgot my uniform, so I apologize. I did a triathlon the other day, so I was really nervous about that and being able to swim in the water and not being able to drown. So I apologize about that. Yeah, so guys, I work in a unique part of the Air Force where we don't usually make the front lines of the newspapers, right? How many of you guys have heard of like the fighter jets, right? F-22s, heard of those? Yep. You guys heard of the F-16s that are in Burlington? Or heard them roaring overhead? Yep. So my job is, right, we have a ton of different aircraft in the Air Force, right? We have a really big military in the United States, don't we? So all these different planes, like the F-22s, or have you guys seen like the cargo aircraft or the tankers before? Yeah, right? So they all do different things, right? But they all work towards one goal together to make sure that things get done, right? To make sure that we stay safe and the bad guys go away, right? So my job is to help everyone kind of like work together. So I'm kind of like a team leader in that aspect. So I'll break it down real simple, like what I've been doing over the deployment, and I'll talk to you guys about like what I learned on it, and like what I learned when I was in your guys' chairs that helped me do my job pretty well, right? So have you guys heard of ISIS in the news? Yep. Do you guys know where they're at? Middle East, right? Anybody know the country? No? Syria, right? Yes. You have a question? Yeah, Syria, right? So I'm gonna draw the board if that's cool, you guys. Yeah? Okay. So Syria looks something roughly like that. I'm not a drawer, okay? Give me some slack for you artists out there. Alright? So what I do, right? There's a giant river that goes through Syria called the Euphrates River. You'll learn about it in high school here, unless you guys already know about it, which is pretty sweet. Yeah. Yeah, so you can see it goes all the way into Iraq. So you have Syria right here, and then you have Iraq right next door, right? And the bad guys were in Iraq as well. So my job, what my aircraft does, I have a giant radar. You guys know what radar does? Yep. What's it do?
Scans the area.
Scans the area, right? And it can see pretty far, right? So the radar on my plane can see over 250 miles, right? So it can see pretty far. So what my job is, I would fly up over Iraq and Syria, and I could see all the aircraft over the entire country of Syria and Iraq, right? So at that point, what my job was to do is to make sure that all of our planes were where they needed to be to protect our guys on the ground, as well as this river here, right? Have you guys heard about Russia on the news? Yeah. Yep. So Russia decided to come over and also aid in the fight against the bad guys, right? So what we decided to do to make sure that we don't run into Russian aircraft and that we're all safe and we don't accidentally start a fight that we don't want to have, is we use this river here, right? We kind of like literally drew a line in the sand. We're like, hey, you stay on that side, we'll stay on this side, and if we need to break that rule, we'll call each other. They actually have there's a guy in the headquarters who can pick up a phone and call the Russian general and say, hey, like, what do you want your coffee? They don't actually talk about that kind of stuff. But so what my job is, we can see the radar hits of all the Russian aircraft flying around Syria, and I can see all my guys. And so if they ever got too close, we would make sure that they were deconflicted with altitude, right? Or if we have an A-10, have you guys heard of A-10s?
Mike, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
What do you mean deconflicted with altitude?
Thank you.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two aircraft, right? These arrows. Don't they look like aircraft? Right? Yeah. This is what we represent aircraft with in the Air Force when we're drawing on whiteboards. If they're both at 24,000 feet, right, what's going to happen?
They're both gonna crash into
Oh, we're gonna crash into each other, right?
Yeah, if they're going in the same exact direction towards each other.
Yeah, exactly, which honestly, you know, all the bad guys tended to be like right over here, so we were always kind of going at each other, right? So what I would do is I can see their altitudes, or how high they are, on my radar screen in front of me. So using the radios that I have on my plane, I could talk to the F-22, right? And I could say, hey man, I need you to go higher.
Or lower.
Or lower, right? I can say, hey, go 1,000 feet higher, or go 1,000 feet lower, so that they could avoid the other aircraft, right? Stay safe, and then go back home to their families at the end of the day, right? So that was one of the important things that I did, right? Now, what else does an airplane need to do to be able to fly? What's it need?
Fuel.
Fuel, right? What's up, buddy? An engine, right? So, 2 good points, right? So, what's up, buddy? Lift, right? And how do they get lift? From the engines, right? And the engines are run by fuel.
Yeah.
You guys are working together. You guys plan that?
No.
No.
So, another thing that I do, other than making sure that they stay safe and separated in the air from other aircraft, is I make sure that they have the fuel to keep their engines running, to keep the lift, right? So, we have tankers that are located all around this area that will come in, roughly in this area. And what they'll do is that they'll sit in a designated circle. So like pretend tankers will hang out, you know, right here. That's the only place that they're allowed to go, because that's the only place I allow them to go. I tell them where to go. They have to listen to me, which is pretty cool. So the A-10 or the F-22, every 30 minutes or so, because they've been flying around so much, they have to go to these tankers, right? And they have to get that gas, otherwise they can't do their mission. So, how often have you guys made a plan that's gone perfectly every single time? Right? Have you guys set goals and then like you guys kind of has to like deviate a little bit, or changes have to happen? Yeah. No one has. I've never had a plan go perfectly. So if you have had one, please see me afterwards. I want to know what you've done, and I'm going to try and change myself. All right. So what happens is that sometimes tankers, they're called tankers, right? There's the KC-135s or the KC-10s if you want to Google them sometimes. They'll break, right? They're old aircraft. They're older than me. They're older than my mom. So weather will cause them to stay on the ground, or sometimes they'll break for maintenance. And so now an A-10 is in the air. And what's up, buddy?
How do players land those circles? Was there air?
Good question. These actually aren't on the ground. These are about 20,000 feet in the air. And they'll just sit there and they'll fly giant circles. Yeah, sorry man, that's a good question, right? Please guys, ask questions.
Tankers like trucks, not airplanes.
Yeah, sorry, no, tankers they're big airplanes. They're giant. If you guys have time after, try and Google it and you'll see how big they are. Guys, if you guys have any questions or I use weird military acronyms, raise your hand or like toss a pencil at me or something, okay? There you go. All right, enough pencil tossing. So the tankers will fly there and sometimes they'll break. So what I have to do then is I have to try and find some sort of aircraft that has extra gas in the area to make sure that that A-10 can stay in the air for a couple more hours, right? And that's very important, because do you guys know what an A-10 does?
It fuels the jets.
No, so A-10s are actually they're fighters, right? So they back up the guys on the ground. What's up?
I know what it takes to do.
What do you do?
They have a massive machine gun on the bottom, and their ground support units.
Yep.
They target ground.
Yeah, so their ground. Yeah, so their ground support, right? So if an A-10 doesn't have fuel to stay overhead of our Army guys, that's bad, right? So now our guys in the Army, right? Now they're in danger because of the ISIS guys in the area. So my job is to make sure an A-10 has gas, to make sure that that A-10 can support the guys on the ground, right? So you can see how I might not be the guy on the ground actually fighting ISIS directly, but I play a role, right, as a teammate to make sure that we get the mission done, right? So that's just kind of an idea, guys, of what I do and what I did over Syria. I deployed, and on my second deployment, I actually got really sick. I actually ended up in the hospital for about 4 or 5 days in Abu Dhabi. Yeah. Abu Dhabi? So,
Hold on, I'm gonna help you with that.
oh, sweet. It's a, you guys seen Fast and Furious?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys know that movie? You guys know the scene where the cars jump between the two buildings? That's Abu Dhabi. That's Abu Dhabi, right?
The other one was the plane you sent though, the tanker was a seafaring. Alright, I'll put that up in just a second. Abu Dhabi.
Alright, awesome, guys. I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see over there on the edge. But, right, so you have Syria, then you have Iraq, right, that I've talked about. This is the area where I was kind of hanging out for my deployment. But then this is where we were based, is the United Arab Emirates. It's a country right here, right on the border of Saudi Arabia, and right across the strait from Iran. So that was the country that we were in, where you saw the two cars jumping between buildings. So, and ended up being sick. It was kind of scary, being thousands of miles away from home and having to be in the hospital. But I'll tell you what, they actually have great health care, just for the adults in the room. The hospitals there are actually based off the United States hospitals. So
relative to where we are, right, so maybe you can, I don't know that they've all had experience with world geography, right? So here we are in Vermont.
So you guys see her up here? And then the way I flew into theater, as they call it, so the way I flew into the United Arab Emirates was, I jumped across the pond, as they call it, to Germany, refueled, and then from Germany, flew all the way down to United Arab Emirates. So literally like on the other side of the world. And it was about a 22-hour plane ride.
Michael, can you describe how it's different there than here? I mean, you spent the first probably 20 years of your life living in Vermont, and then all of a sudden you were halfway across the world. Was it like Vermont?
Not at all. So Vermont's nice and green, and you get the blue skies, and like you get the water that's nice and blue, and you got flowers. United Arab Emirates is pretty much, originally it was a desert, right? It is very, very brown, right? And there's so much sand and dust in the area that once the wind kicks up into the air, so even the sky becomes like a weird blue tan. So it's not as nice and colorful as it is here. Also, the people there, originally what they did, they were like herders and wanderers of the desert, right? So they've adapted their clothing and their culture to allow them to survive in that. So have you guys ever seen the wardrobe that they wear over there? They wear these long, lightweight gowns, and typically with a headdress on top as well to kind of keep their heads cool. I actually had the opportunity to work with to get to know one of the Emirati, as they call them, Emirati soldiers. And so he let me try on his actual gown that he wears. And honestly, I don't know why we wear the clothes we do, because it's the most comfortable thing that I have ever put on my entire life.
Is there a name for it, what they wear? All right. I know. I was going to Google it so that they could see what it was that you wore. Do you know what it's called?
We always just call them man jammies.
The man jammies.
They're the most comfortable.
I don't know that I want to Google man jammies with that up on the screen.
Google that's the aircraft I fly on. ACS. Yeah, perfect. Can you guys see this? So this right, but you guys see this? This is the radar. This frisbee, or Oreo, as some of us call it. This is the radar that I use to make sure my job is done. It's kind of hard to see too, but we have about 20 different radio antennas all over the aircraft, so we can talk to just anybody and everybody that we want to. And we actually have a phone on board And if I wanted to, I could probably call my mom when I was over Iraq and Syria. I asked that, but they didn't let me do that. So, but yeah, that's what our actual aircraft looks like.
So Michael, when I was their age, and I saw war programs on TV like MASH or something like that, it appeared to me as though all air command was on the ground. Like I remember seeing radars, like movies like Rambo or something like that, right? Like the radars where people were standing or sitting on the ground in a building, controlling things. And what you're saying is that actually most air command actually occurs from the air.
Sort of. There's different levels of command.
Yep.
What we are called is tactical command and control. And the best way for me to describe that for you guys is that we work directly with the fighter jets, right? We work on what that F-22 is doing. Like say the F-22, he's trying to make sure that he has to bomb a bank, right? To make sure that ISIS can't take any money out of the ATM anymore, right? So my focus is on that smaller level stuff, right? The F-22, making sure he has what he needs, right, to get rid of the bank. We also have operational control. This is what F-22 looks like, guys, by the way, if you haven't seen the news. There's a higher level control that thinks about the bigger picture, right? So like take for example Mr. Rulo, right? He focuses on you guys, right? So he's tactical command and control for teaching the students, right? But then you have the principal, right? And what's the principal's responsibility? The whole school, right? She got a much bigger picture in terms of what she needs to take care of. So I'm more like a classroom teacher, like Mr. Rulo, Mr. Coffee are, in aspects of like what we do overseas.
This is the best plane in the U.S. inventory right here.
Yeah, so here's the A-10, right? And there's that, yeah, exactly. There's the gun you see. You see the teeth right there? Yeah, the guys in the Army, they love this plane because, as you guys mentioned, this is what keeps them safe the most consistently. Yeah, you can vouch for that. What's up, buddy?
Didn't you say you were going to show us the tanker?
I'm a little small.
Yeah, he's just showing you the cool stuff.
So Mr. Cattell came over and said, show them the A-10 Warhawk, and I appreciate you just saying, this is the one that protects everybody. This isn't the sexy one that's in all the movies. No, like the F-22, the F-16. So if you've ever seen, what's the movie with Tom Cruise?
Top Gun.
If you've ever seen the movie Top Gun, right? That's not the one you see. You see the F-16. I think it's an F-16 in that particular movie. Yeah, but this is the one that apparently does the majority of the work of keeping everybody safe.
That plane in and of itself, they would have what they called flybys. That plane just showing up doesn't even have to shoot or drop anything. Just that plane showing up and flying through a valley is enough to make the bad guys go home and not want to come back until it's gone.
Yep.
Never see that one in the movie.
I have seen this jet before that there's this technology in it, so this person, the pilot, can turn his head and look at someone, and then the gun will turn and point at that person that the pilot's looking at.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it a jet? Was it like a helicopter?
It was a jet.
Oh, do you remember what it's called?
No, I don't remember.
I gotta do my research when I get back. I gotta see what one that is. That sounds cool, man. Yeah, now Mr. Rule's pulling up that tanker so you guys can see this. You can actually see it refueling.
That's a big one. That's awesome. It's just
Yeah, so what the jets will actually do is they have to pull up right underneath within a couple of hundred of feet, moving 300 miles an hour, 400 miles an hour at 25,000 feet, and try and get, they have like, you guys seen the gas tanks on cars, right?
Yeah.
How big is that? That's like,
Yeah,
that?
it's about.
Yeah, planes are about this big. So they have to get a hose into that small area, moving that fast, that high. So you can imagine that's pretty difficult, right? Yeah, so And my friends actually had an opportunity to fly in the back of these when the Vermont Guard was out overseas, so that was pretty cool.
So your job is interesting to me that all of these planes are all in the air. Like there's all in the air all the time. And your job is to coordinate those planes. So that there's no crashes, and that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and that they're not crossing paths with Russia. They might cross paths with the enemy, but I've seen in the news on CNN that there's been a close call was reported that two planes became, where somebody went into somebody's airspace, and the average person in the public doesn't really recognize that, how significant that is. Maybe you could explain why that's a big deal and what potentially could happen if we went into the wrong airspace.
Yeah. All right, so you guys have been listening to the news or getting spun up on our relationship with Russia, right? Some days it's okay, right? Other days, right? Russia doesn't really like us, or they say we really don't like them, right? Right now, they're over there, and they're not over there because they dislike us. I mean, we're not their favorite, but they're over there because they think ISIS is bad as well, right? But do you think they're talking to us on the radio, letting us know what they're doing?
No.
No, right? They don't want to let us. They can't give away their military secrets, and we can't give away ours.
Yes.
Right? And so ISIS has decided to bunker up, or like hide up right along this river, conveniently right where we decided to try and stay away from each other, right? So these planes, like I mentioned, moving hundreds of miles an hour, are all flying in close proximity to each other. And so if our aircraft run into each other, right, no one's there to actually see it except for the pilots, right? So it could be assumed, right? Russia might assume if one of their aircraft goes down that we shot them down, or vice versa, right? We might think that they shot us down, right? And what's going to happen if those rumors start to fly, right? But right, it would just be a mistake, right? We're not actually trying to fire at each other or kill each other, right? It was just be a mistake. So we want to make sure and be very clear with the Russians while we're over there that we're over there not to fight them. We're over there, we're trying to achieve the same goal, just in a weird way, right? Where you're playing the silent treatment with each other to avoid any political ramifications of starting a bigger conflict that nobody wants. So, and there's a few times, right, where the Russians would actually fly over that river in order to accomplish some sort of mission that they told us about. So when that happened, you can imagine that I started to get the hairs on the back of my neck start to stand up, because once that happens, we need to move all of our planes out of the way, right, to make sure that those mistakes, right, with them, because they don't, right, when we talked about me deconflicting altitudes, right, I can talk to the F-22, but can I talk to the Russian plane?
No.
No, I can't talk to the Russian plane. So he's going to do whatever he wants, right? So I don't know what he's going to do. I have to start paying attention to what altitude he's at and where he's flying, and make sure that we keep moving our guys out of the way, regardless of how reckless he might be being. So, what's up, buddy?
I have seen and heard sometimes about Russia. We can be very close, but even if we are close together countries, they are still very secretive about some things that they did, and sometimes some things that they have done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. How many time is through?
You're great. Probably got another half an hour or so if you want.
Okay. Well, so I talked about, what's up, man?
Alright, so you know the movie Wolverine, you know how they dropped the movie?
Of course I know the movie Wolverine.
Yeah, I dropped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but have you ever dropped it?
No. No one wants that. I'm not, thankfully. But guys, real quick, right? So like, why did I tell you? Why did I spend all this time telling you what I did, right? What I've done overseas and all that, right? Why do you guys, as 7th, 8th graders, why do you care, right? And I'll tell you why. The skills that I learned, right? I'm working on my jet. I have 24 people on my jet. Do you think I like all of them?
No.
No, right? I'll be honest with you, right? I don't get along with everybody. I don't even get along with my own brother and sister every now and then. All right? they all have their own jobs on the aircraft as well. And do you think if I don't like somebody that I should not talk to them, or I should like be disrespectful to them on that plane?
No.
Right? Because what can happen if I don't think bigger picture, if I don't push past my own emotions and like my own thoughts on somebody, that mission's not going to get done, right? So worst case scenario, what can happen is if the guy next to me who's maybe talking to an A-10 who needs gas, and I decide I don't like this guy named, Jimmy John's, right? Great sandwiches. If I don't like Jimmy John, well, I'm not going to tell him that I know where the tanker is for the A-10. And now, because of my little personal feelings with Jimmy John here, that A-10 has to go home, and now somebody on the ground has died because of it, right? So what the military has taught me, and something that I learned way back in your shoes, right? You hear it all the time, right? Be respectful to people, right? Don't let the small things get to you. You guys got to learn those skills and hammer those skills down now, so that when you're flying, some of you, I don't know what you're going to do. You guys could, but I guarantee you, whatever jobs you guys decide to do after high school, it's going to involve you working with somebody, and I would say 90% of the chance somebody you don't like, right? And you can either let that get to you and inhibit how good you are at your job, or you can take the higher road, push past it, become a better person for it, and make sure that you're able to accomplish the mission. Because at the end of the day, like, you guys control what you do, you guys control how you act, and it's not easy all the time. Like for me, personally, what I gotta do is I call my mom every day in bed, and I'm 28 years old. I don't call her every day, but I find someone to vent to, But when you're in the time and you find someone who's frustrating you and you don't like, that doesn't mean you don't work with that person and respect that person, right? And that's something I struggle with every day, right? But that's something that I learned a strong lesson when I was overseas, right? Is working with people I don't like and still getting the job done. So, all right, I've talked your ear off, guys.
When you had, I want to ask you a couple of questions. I'm sure they have some questions
Yeah, I'm going to
too.
open up the questions.
So when you were 12 years old, sitting in a Team USA classroom, could you envision yourself being in charge of 24 people on a plane, flying over a Middle Eastern country, preventing two world powers from potentially getting it, like as you were talking and I was thinking about the enormity of a simple decision that you make, if you are not paying close attention and you make a poor decision and two planes from Russia and the United States come together and something awful happens, you could essentially start a world war. Before you came in this morning, I knew you were coming in this morning. I didn't know exactly what you did, but you're just a kid from St. Albans, right? Who was sitting in a seat just like these guys, and you're making decisions on a daily basis that could impact the peace in the world.
So I guess my question was similar to that. Was you were sitting in my class, Mr. Warren, Mr. D, Ms. Plewett's class. Was this on your mind? Did you know coming out of 7th and 8th grade what the heck you were going to do with your life?
So I was. You guys remember 9/11? Remember it?
I don't remember.
So I was.
No, you don't remember. You
Yeah.
don't lie.
Well,
They weren't born.
They were. I was gonna say.
This group of kids was not born.
Wow. So I was in 5th grade. I was in 5th grade when the towers were attacked, right? And on that day, a couple things happened. I didn't understand what the World Trade Center was. Small kid from St. Albans. I didn't understand what New York City was. My mom was crying because we thought my uncle worked in the World Trade Center 2 weeks out of the month. My other uncle was supposed to be flying the plane that flew into it, right? So we weren't sure where he was at. My Uncle Barron, I don't know if you guys have been spoken to by him at all. He was the first fighter jet over New York City after the towers went down. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, my dad stops coming home in scrubs because he's a nurse, and he starts coming home in a military uniform. And so he deployed a couple months later. And so at that point, once I started to understand things, when I was in 6th or 7th grade, Mr. Coffey, that's when I just started to decide I wanted to do the military. But I had no idea the responsibilities or what I would be doing now. I had an idea I wanted to go in the military, but I didn't understand who I'd be working with or the mission I'd be doing. So. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Or comments.
Comments, yeah. What's up, buddy?
My great grandpa was a Marine.
Oh, was he?
Still alive.
Wow. Damn, he's a tough guy. Yeah. What's up?
It was supposed to be a tradition in my family to be in the Marines, but if you Kevin and we'll be able to check it out.
What are they doing? And figure it out. What's up?
My uncle's a recruiter in Idaho.
Oh, really? For the Army or for the Marines? Man, you guys got a lot of Marines and stuff over here. What's up, buddy?
Why is there a country called Turkey?
Why is there a country called? That's a great question.
It's Djibouti.
That's a great question.
It's Djibouti.
Look that up.
Turkey is an old country.
Yeah.
Older than the United States.
One of the oldest.
There's Djibouti on there.
Hey, do you guys have any other questions for Michael, maybe related to things you're thinking about as a 7th or an 8th grader here at City School and wondering maybe what his experience was like and how he relates that to his everyday life now? Randall, did you have a comment or a question? Go ahead.
Have you ever been in a tank?
Yes. And they're really cool.
I was about to say, it must be cool.
Not a lot of space in there.
But how do you see from inside the tank?
They got like a little periscope type technology in there.
Like, do you ever shot it?
No, I have not. Yeah.
We have a question over here from Lionel.
What's up, man?
What type of tank did you go on? I mean, what were the controls? Just sort of inside, so and if so, were you gonna?
I was neither. They just let me get down in there and sit in the seat. It was the M1 Abrams tank, the one that the Army uses.
So Michael is in the Air Force.
Yeah, I know.
Not many tanks in the Air Force, I don't think.
I mean, you don't just get into the Air Force, you have
I ended up going to basic, like a version of basic. Anyone in the Army and the Marines would probably laugh at my basic, but I went down to Alabama for 6 weeks, halfway through college, where I got yelled at by a drill sergeant, played some very intense paintball, and lived out of tents at 8 MREs for 2 weeks. So that was actually a pretty good time. Like, one of the weirdest ways possible for a good time. What's up? Yeah, they're pretty good, right?
I've been in a Marine.
Pudding powder? What's up, Dan?
My uncle for Christmas gets me and my brothers MREs. They're good.
Sorry, what?
My uncle for Christmas gives us MREs. They're good.
Guys,
Yeah, they're not bad, right? I never thought about Christmas presents. That was
What's an
funny.
MRE?
Meal ready to eat. And it's like literally just like what soldiers eat out on the field if they're so lucky enough to get that stuff.
It's like 2,000 calories.
Okay. What's up, buddy?
Alright, so, you know, one of the movies in Fast and Furious, you know how they drop the tank out of the
Yes.
You have something.
I think that was all GCI. I don't think anyone's ever done that. So, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Michael, just before you leave, some of these guys are, 8th graders are going down the path of getting into high school next year, and soon enough, in a few months, we'll be talking about what do they want to do, career path. You went to BFA and went up a lot sooner than I have, but what types of things did you do to set yourself up so you could go on to be in the Air Force and be in the military? What would you recommend for an 8th grader to do if they want to go down your path? What type of path should they follow?
So thanks, Mr. Coffey. The first thing I did as an 8th grader or freshman, that transition, was like I honestly I knew I wanted to do the military, but how do you know what you want to do if you've actually never done it before, right? Does that kind of make sense? So the first thing I did was I kind of found like a mentor, some sort of like a teacher who would be able to help me throughout high school. You'll be assigned an advisor in high school, but maybe that person isn't someone that you feel is personable with, and that's fine, right? So I found a teacher who I would be able to go to with questions constantly. I also talked to someone who was actually in the military. Yes, my dad was and my uncle, but I also made sure I emailed people in different branches, like the Marines, right? I thought about the Marines for a while. I thought about the Navy for a while. So I actually talked to people, or I even, at one point I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I shadowed an electrical engineer for a day, right? That way you can see what they do, you can learn what their day-to-day life is like. So finding the mentor and then actually like talking to someone who did the job are the two most important things you guys can do to figure out what you want to do with your life. And then from that point, right, then you know what classes that you want to sign up for at BFA. But the biggest thing is, guys, if you know what you want to do when you leave high school, that's great. But majority of my friends and I, we had no idea what we wanted to do. So the best thing you can do is work hard in all the classes you decide to take, like get the best grades and make the best connections you can with your teachers, so that when the time comes and you need to make a choice on what direction you want to go in life, you have 20 doors open instead of 10 doors open. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? The harder you work, the more opportunities you are actually going to have, which is going to give you some choices in life, and therefore you'll probably have to be happy with that. So.
My dad's a carpenter, but he can do tons of other stuff. He can do electric stuff, plumbing, build a house.
Yeah. Get those doors open.
So Michael, I heard you say it. I want to repeat this because I think this is really important for you guys to get. You identified a mentor, which is somebody that you spoke with fairly regularly, asked questions. I don't know if that mentor was had a military background. Did that person have a military background?
I specifically chose one not with a military background, just to keep a more open mind.
Sure.
Picture about.
So you identified somebody that you could connect with, an adult that you could ask questions, bounce ideas off of, get some advice from, somebody that you trusted. And then I also heard you say you took advantage of opportunities to try some things out for a day. I heard the electrical engineer thing. So it sounds like you went for a day and you were like, this is probably not for me.
Mm-hmm.
You determined that in that day?
Yes.
All right, this is not for me.
Yep.
I really appreciate that what you demonstrated there is that you took some risks. You took some, it would have been easier for you just to potentially just to get up and go to school that day and not put yourself out there to be with I don't know if it was a stranger or not.
Yep.
But you could have taken the easier path, but you chose to take something a little more challenging, put yourself out there, and as a result, you at least figured out what you didn't want to do. Because I don't know that you all know what you want to do right now. Maybe you have some idea. I listened to a gentleman speak yesterday morning on the news, and what he said is that by the time you guys are actually able to really get a career, number one, you're probably not going to be in that career for your entire life. You're probably going to change your career multiple times. And number two, he said, most of the jobs don't even exist yet. And they don't exist because we haven't gone there with whatever the technology is. So you may need to be prepared to do something you never imagined you'd do because it didn't exist when you started thinking about it. But I appreciate that you took some risks and that you made some connections with people who could support you and help you. You guys have any other questions?
Michael, I just want to thank you. It's been, it's the second, maybe third time, I don't know, it's been a couple times. I always seem to pick something else up every time you come in.
Yeah.
And the job you have of keeping our borders safe, our allies safe, is just amazing to me. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for coming in.